So the US government is moving towards a shutdown. But here's the crazy thing, even if it happens, money to Ukraine will still continue, and the value of the dollar will continue to get debased. So let's talk about America's economic shutdown because it's becoming a tradition, and a big casualty will be the US dollar. And here's the big sticking issue, it's none other than increasing funding to Ukraine. America needs more money for the war effort, but parts of Congress aren't too happy about it. Remember, every dollar cent is money being borrowed into existence. America has to sell more bonds, and interest rates are now sky high. And so far, Congress has approved 113 billion in military, humanitarian, and economic aid to Ukraine. And President Biden is looking for another $24 billion to give Zelensky. You can literally feel the frustration amongst the senators. Lawmakers like Rand Paul are pissed off that more money has to be borrowed, putting America deeper into debt. We cannot continue business as usual. We cannot keep putting the needs of other countries above our own. We cannot save Ukraine by dooming the American economy. Then you have people like Mitch McConnell ready to send money now. He was ready to send money yesterday. According to him, American support for Ukraine is not charity. It is in our own direct interest, not least because degrading Russia helps to deter China. And if Congress can't reach an agreement about this funding, the US government will shut down again. It's not the first time a shutdown has happened, but this time it's kind of different. America has sandwiched itself into an economic hell. Behind both doors is an economic disaster. No matter what they choose, which option they choose, the end result will be an economic hell. Now, if Congress approves the spending bill, inflation will continue and the national debt will just balloon even further. But if they don't, if they decide not to approve it, then we have a deadlock and a shutdown will happen. And this means big parts of the government will literally go into stasis and wreak havoc on the US economy. And in our lead story today, shutdown showdown in US Congress, time running short to fund the US government. And we only have days left before October the 1st. And if a deal isn't reached by then, Washington will shut down and a ton of services will be disrupted. And this is a serious issue that could cause big damage in the US economy. If a shutdown happens, federal agencies will stop spending on everything non-essential. There will be millions of government employees, including the military, that won't get their paychecks. And this is going to include law enforcement, transportation, national parks, and even healthcare. Even the museums will be affected. And here's the hilarious thing. The US government shutdown would affect the release of economic data. Now, all those employment and CPI inflation data won't be published. And I kind of guess that would be a good thing for the government if all those employment figures are collapsing and inflation is soaring. But here's the big concern. The US economy isn't as strong or resilient as Janet Yellen really says it is. What we have is an economy powered by endless deficit spending. And if a government shutdown happens, that could be the spark that plunges the United States into a recession. And that might just be the genesis of the collapse. Now I want to ask you a question. What really drives the US economy? And if you said consumer spending, you would be 100% right. But do you know the US government is also a consumer and their spending drives a huge part of GDP? A shutdown will collapse that segment of demand, which could spell doom for the economy. In 2022, government spending made up 37% of US GDP. And I'm very confident once the figures are out for 2023 this year, this number will be above 40%. And this is an economy that's propped up by government money. It is fueled by deficit spending. Remember the good old lockdown days? Because of money printing, government spending accounted for nearly 50% of GDP in 2020. So just imagine what will happen if a government shutdown really occurs. Suddenly, a ton of people won't have money coming in. They are technically jobless and won't have the money to consume anything. And this is going to be big because the real economy is going to be affected. Rents are going to get unpaid, groceries won't be bought, and you can kiss goodbye to discretionary spending. And that's why the stock market has been crashing over the past few days. It's not just because of higher oil prices, but because everyone is freaking out over this shutdown debacle. However, there's a bigger issue, and it's all about if the United States can ever pay back its debt. Okay, so we know that they can't, right? But most people in the mainstream still have a fantasy that US bonds are credit worthy. I know it's a shock on this channel, but that's what most people still believe in. But here's a warning from a major ratings agency that we must pay attention to. According to Moody's, America is risking its top credit rating with this government shutdown. It's now all about the reputation of the US government, and if they can truly get their house in order, it will underscore the weakness of US institutional and governance strength relative to other AAA rated sovereigns. It's basically an implicit warning that America could be downgraded yet again by another rating agency. It doesn't deserve its AAA rating from Moody's. And in another slap to the face, the ratings agency just told the world the truth. The US economy is in a period of declining fiscal strength driven by persistent fiscal deficits and deteriorating debt affordability. We have said that 1,000 times before. If the US credit rating collapses again, this will push bond yields even higher. And this will be a disaster because the whole world is already afraid of buying US treasuries. You have investors on the street afraid that the Federal Reserve is going to hike even higher by year's end. Then you have Japan and China selling their treasury bonds like no tomorrow. The global bid for treasuries is starting to collapse, it's starting to dry up. And this will spell doom for the US economy. We are moving dangerously closer and closer towards a fiscal cliff. There will come a point in time when borrowing simply becomes impossible. Take a look at the 10-year yield chart. We are heading dangerously towards the 2007 peak that went above 5% yield, and that was just before the US housing collapse, before the Federal Reserve had to step in and helicopter drop money into the economy. Janet Yellen and Powell are caught between the devil and a deep blue sea, and if a downgrade happens, yields could spike up again. And if Congress approves the spending bill with that $24 billion for Ukraine, more borrowing will happen and yields will hit up as well. And this is not a good situation, and there's no easy way out of this glorious mess. But let's walk through door A, shall we? Because I'm 99%, scratch that, I'm 99.99% sure Ukraine will get their money. The Senate has already put forth a stopgap spending bill that will postpone a shutdown until November the 17th. In other words, they want to kick the can down the road, which is nothing new. Now, this stopgap bill is still going to give Ukraine funding. It includes $6.2 billion in aid and another $6 billion for natural disasters. It's 25% of what President Biden asked for Ukraine, and this might actually pass. Whether you support this or not, the mechanics and the effects can't be denied. To raise the money, our best friend Janet Yellen has to flood the market with even more debt, and it is a bloodbath out there. Just look at bond yields across the board. Should she raise money on the short end and borrow at 5.5%, or should she borrow money at 4.5% but keep paying interest for 10 to 30 years? Either way, the amount of debt is going to pile up and the dollar is going to get debased further. It's undeniable that the reserve currency is going to lose buying power. And every time Congress they start dueling with each other, it's another reminder to the world that borrowing is out of control. And I want us to think about what happens years from now, because funding to Ukraine won't stop. Too much money has been committed, and I don't see the US stopping the helicopter money. Now, after the destruction of Europe during World War II, America launched the Marshall Plan. In their own words, it was to provide markets for American goods, create reliable trading partners, and support the development of stable democratic governments in Western Europe. It's basically spending money to rebuild and reshape Europe according to America's wishes, according to their vision. But understand how much it costs. Under the Marshall Plan, the US coughed up $13.3 billion, which is equivalent to 150 billion in today's money. We are already reaching that amount today with no victory in sight. Estimates from the World Bank puts the reconstruction of Ukraine at over $400 billion. But where is that money going to come from? And let's say the West confiscates Russia's reserves to pay for the rebuilding. It's only $100 billion. The shortfall has to come from somewhere else. And my guess is probably going to come from US deficit spending. They will once again flood the market with treasury bonds to raise the money. And this will increase the money supply while keeping bond yields elevated. So we have to be mentally prepared for another few $100 billion, maybe even a trillion, coming in future spending bills. And all these government shutdowns and the debt ceiling debates are just kabuki theater. It's a song and dance that will reach more or less the same conclusion, right? More money will be borrowed from future generations to fund whatever idea or scheme they have today. It might be to fight the Russians or to fund their green energy idea, their green energy hope, the renewable dream. But every time the money supply grows bigger, it is the people on the top, those with assets that gets richer and richer. Looking at the average household wealth in America, we can immediately see the top beneficiaries of the dollar getting debased. The top 0.1% had their wealth grow exponentially in 2020. Comparatively, the rest of the country's wealth stayed relatively flat. It didn't grow much. Many people are treading water, desperately trying to keep up with inflation. So there are clear winners and losers whenever you print money, whenever you increase the money supply. So understand what this government shutdown means. It is just a speed bump on this grand scheme of deficit spending. More borrowing will happen, and the closer the US balance sheet gets towards a fiscal cliff, the real casualty will be the buying power of the US dollar. And if a shutdown does happen, the markets will likely crash, but it won't last for long. They'll come to another agreement and borrow money once again to keep the music going. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will the government shut down and will Ukraine get their money? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.